Hey guys, welcome to Solo ReacTalk. I'm going to be reacting to the GOFF clan of ORKS. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. GOFF, yeah. It's part of the Kronan playlist made by Baldermort's Guide to Warhammer. If you want to check out my previous reactions, remember the playlist card will be at the top. Just click on it and you'll be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as Baldermort's Guide to Warhammer YouTube channel, the links are in the description below. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
Between the time when chaos broke Cadia and the return of the sons of the Emperor, there was a time undreamed of. And unto this, Kronan, destined to wear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia upon a troubled brow. It is I, his chronicler, who alone can tell thee of his saga. Let me tell you of the days of high adventure. Kronan and the ways of cunning. Kronan the Cunning. His legend was begun, but it was a very short legend thus far. And so we reach a montage moment, covering a good few weeks and months, and a larger increase in his orc power as more tribes flocked to his banner. But a brief one, because it's not the 80s. And so, Kronan began to walk the path of the cunning without fear. He welcomed ideas, and even came to trust some of them. One of his best ideas, the truest expression of cunning, was to learn from those around him. Thus it
That is good, Kronan. That is very good. You know, learn from others around you. Implement their ideas into your, mission plans. Yeah, that's good. That's not what I expected, actually, from an orc, especially from a war boss. I thought like the war boss would be the one to do everything, to see and understand the plans, and implement the plans. But no, it seems like Kronan is really doing something. I'm thinking it is unique amongst war bosses, but I don't know. Yeah, it's good.
Was that he took the boss of the Blood Axe tribe deep into his council, whatever that means, and by the fire they spoke of the ways of cunning. To move backwards was not always to run away. Sometimes the enemy would follow you into a trap. The ways of cunning seemed awfully like base knavery and utterly jelly-spined cowardice to Kronan. But the Blood Axe assured him it was actually cunning. And it seemed confusing at first. Kronan had to master his entire will, not to tear the head off the lesser boss, just to get him to shut up. But Kronan's will was iron, and the talking continued. It did so only because Kronan could feel it. The cunning rising. He was absorbing it, like the trees took in sunlight. Osmose thingy was his for cunning, or something like that, thought Kronan.
I'm just trying to imagine these two orcs, sitting around a fire and discussing. It's just, it's so funny in my mind, but I don't know, like really. I wouldn't be able to take them seriously. And I think that's also part of, this kind of mysteriousness of the orcs that I have, of them. How they're able to push back the Imperium of Man forces or any other force that they're fighting against. Because when I see orcs, I just hear, wow! And then they're all pushing forward and attacking their enemies and destroying their enemies. They're not really, having some sort of plan of how they're going to do it. But now that I'm hearing Baldermort's guide, saying that these guys are around a campfire and talking and discussing, it's it's kind of hard for me to take that seriously. But yeah, no, it's good. It's a nice learning curve for me.
As he began to comprehend. He now saw all of his mobs, clans, cultures, all of his forces as different things entirely. Ingredients to a masterfully cooked banquet of battle. An orchestra through which he would play a symphony of savagery. A paean to the power of Gork and Mork. Or he would have done, if he were more verbose. But it was a good thing, no matter the phraseology. And he already knew the issues. The constant drain on his time, his joy. The ones who slowed him down. So some would have to go. Boss Rotbagger of the Death Skulls, whose nosing about on battlefields drained speed from their onward rush into Humy lands. Boss Redwheel of the Evil Sons, who kept heading off on excursions beyond where Kronan wanted the Humys to know they could reach. And of course, Boss Nostril Splitter of the Bad Moons, who had destabilized the natural loot dispersal matrices, causing force scarcity to inflate his market dominance, draining the War of its resources. Or, more simply...
Did Kronan think like that? Oh, okay.
They put, Nostril Splitter was profiting mightily and slowing him down. Which is still not how Kronan would have put any of it, but a fact is a fact, no matter how you dress it up. So the bosses were all called, their boys all arrayed as if for a battle, but it was to be a battle against their own natures, their own propensity toward ignoring cunning. It would be a celebration of cunning and should, just should, mind you, give birth to a veritable infusion of cunning across the entire blossoming war. Thinking grots by the thousands were being gathered, and a mighty mass cogitation was to transpire. Their very first massed think. Their very first Thinkmas. And so the preparations for Thinkmas continued, all throughout the night. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k setting, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And as it is October, we shall be continuing our exploration of the Orc forces, and we begin with one of the most simple and yet still interesting factions of Orcs, those that are the paragons of all things Orky, and what most will always think of whenever the race are discussed. The GOFFs. For Orcs are broken down not only into mobs and tribes, but also by clan, or culture as they call it, a perspective and particular way of war. Later entries will go through the nuances of the other clans, but I thought it best we begin with the GOFFs, for they are direct, but also because White Dwarf has an entry that gives an update on their present condition in the setting in 9th edition. As the guides are predominantly for new players, it made sense to begin here. And I will be quoting extensively, as I do not see the point in paraphrasing, rephrasing, or reinventing the wheel, so to put it, as this permits me more time to craft the ongoing narratives that show the nature of the Orcs, instead of just telling. Hence, the tale about Kronan will be interspersed throughout the video as flavour pieces that are designed for just the simple joy of being Orky. And so, let us engage with the journey and, as usual, let us lean on the very newest existing wisdom. To quote Index Xenos, GOFF Orcs, by Dan Harden and Elliot Harmer. The Orcs fight not for cruel gods or power-hungry despots, nor do they fight for self-preservation or some deep ideological belief. They fight because they can, and because they enjoy it. Of all the Orcs, it is the GOFFs that are the most aggressive and violent, their brutal lives consumed by constant warfare. For a GOFF Orc, life's not worth living if it doesn't involve a chopper and an enemy to hit with it. An ocean of muscular green bodies stretches as far as the eye can see. A stinking horde of dank, unwashed flesh, mouldering leather and oiled metal. The sound of revving chain blades shreds the air, punctuated by the bark of high-caliber guns being fired skyward. Already the guttural bellows of war bosses can be heard, marshalling the mobs into some semblance of order. Clanking war machines stomp into position as ramshackle vehicles race to the flanks, smoke belching from their oversized exhausts to obscure the sky above the royal and green horde. Crude artillery is wheeled into position, manned by diminutive grots whose backs are marked by the whips of their slavers. The trophies of slain foes hang from torn banners and iron-wrought totems, a warning to those who choose to stand and fight. There is a palpable aura of cruelty and impending violence in the air. With a bellowed wah of unbridled aggression, the greenskins begin their earth-shaking advance. The ground heaves and buckles as tens of thousands of orc boys surge forwards, choppers raised in preparation for the carnage they are about to unleash.
I wonder what would terrify me the most, an advancing force of Tyranids or maybe an advancing force of orcs. I'm not really sure which one would terrify me the most. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Buggies, war bikes, trucks and battle wagons accelerate violently across the battlefield, the drivers grinning maniacally as their gunners spray torrents of flames, bullets and rockets into the enemy ranks. Death Dreads, Killer Cans, Gorkanauts and Stompers lurch into life, their cannons beating out a staccato rhythm of destruction as they march ungainly into battle. The orcs close the distance to their foes with the inevitability of a tsunami approaching a shoreline. Many are cut down by enemy fire, their bodies trampled into the dirt as others take their place. Vehicles and war machines denote as they are targeted by enemy heavy fire, the wreckage falling on the greenskin advances burning rain.
It doesn't matter how much firepower you have, it just doesn't matter. This is a tsunami wave that has so much energy, it will just keep pushing forward until it, hits your position. So yeah, this is frightening.
Roar with laughter, their collective psyche stoked to a roaring blaze by the destruction. Shooters and sluggers roar as the distance closes. The screeching of chain weapons assails the ears as the stench of the orcs assails the nostrils. The senses are overwhelmed as the horde descends. Fear takes hold, terror ensues. Only the brave, foolhardy and insane hold their ground. Champions of GOFF. At the forefront of the orc assault fight the tribe's GOFF orcs. They are the most belligerent of an already belligerent race, and the carnage they wreak on the enemy's lines is incomprehensible, the ferocity of their impact unimaginable. Choppers are swung with reckless abandon, shearing heads from shoulders and cleaving limbs from torsos. Victims are bludgeoned to the ground, then stomped, pummeled and shot until there is nothing left but gore and viscera. Chain blades shred and slice, chunks of flesh and arterial spray fly high in the air. Massive power claws clamp shut around armoured foes, their hydraulic pistons straining until something gives way, and the blades meet with a satisfying clang. The air is pungent with the smell of burnt metal and seared flesh. There is no subtlety or guile to the GOFF's attacks, only an overwhelming desire to break, maim and obliterate everything that crosses their paths. So savage and unpredictable is their assault that the enemy quickly falls back, unable to hold their ground against the pressing of stinking green bodies. Yet there is worse to come, for the boys are merely the spearhead of the GOFF's assault. As the enemy reels from the impact of their charge, clanking Death Dreads push through the scrum, their buzzsaw limbs ripping through friend and foe alike as they begin their bloody work. Ramshackle trucks crash into the melee, delivering more boys and armoured knobs into the fight. Battle wagons steamroll through infantry with impunity, grinding bodies beneath armoured treads and spiked rollers before disgorging their deadly cargo into the heart of the enemy's ranks. The clan's warboss roars with bestial euphoria as he hacks and hews at the most impressive foes he can find, every kill cementing his place at the head of the warband. The battle will be fierce, and losses on both sides will be heavy. Yet, win or lose, the Goff orcs will revel in the destruction they cause. After all, victory is good, but a defeat means there is always another opportunity for a fight. Goff boys. Goff boys are strong advocates for the theory that might is right. Not that they would ever say so with words. They just use their fists to get the point across to the boys of other clans. They see it as their Gork-given right to lord it over other orcs, and show them how to do things proper. While this can lead to animosity between clans, orc disputes are almost always resolved in a fighting pit, which is virtually a second home to Goff orcs. While bets are placed on the outcome of the fight, no self-respecting Goff orc would ever enter the pit with the intention of earning a few teeth. A proper orc should always be willing to fight for free. Before a battle, a tribe's Goff orcs will invariably push, shove and kick their way to the front of the advance, so that they are closest to the enemy when the battle begins. After all, they have a reputation to uphold as the biggest and hardest orcs around, and they're not going to be seen mucking around when they could be hitting something. Most Goffs prefer to fight on foot, enabling them to get right up close to the enemy and experience every bone-crunching kill. However, they're not averse to commandeering a truck or battle wagon, if it will help them get into the thick of the fighting before a rival mob. While boys from other clans take pride in their shiny yellow armor or big blue death guns, most Goff orcs tend to favor the simple weapons in life: a sharp chopper and a loud slugger.
I guess that's one way of, seeing the difference between their clan and other clans of orcs. They're just wearing very simple attire with their weapons. They're not really on vehicles like the other clans, and they also yearn for battle up close and personal, instead of mid-range or long-range attacks. So yeah, I guess that's one way to recognize this clan of orcs, the GOFF.
Should either of these weapons fail him in battle, he is more than happy to fight with his fists and even his head, which is why Goths tend to wear spiked and horned helms. Indeed, headbutting contests are even seen as a rite of passage amongst the Goths. Should a youth, a young orc, wish to join a mob of boys, he must don a horned helmet and engage other youths in a headbutting contest to see who is worthy of joining the mob. Casualties are unsurprisingly high, though this does ensure that the weak are weeded out early on. Goth mobs are usually dozens strong, with warbands numbering in the hundreds, if not thousands. When they march to war, they do so en masse, drowning their foes beneath a tide of black-clad bodies. Enemy commanders often believe that this is some crude tactic to overwhelm their position with sheer weight of numbers. Most likely, the Goths are just headed in the same direction, each individual boy reasoning that if one of their number is running somewhere, then there must be something worth fighting at the destination. It's this straightforward.
That will leave you, you and your forces bewildered, because you won't be able to plan a proper attack or defense against these orcs. Because, at one moment they'll be following that orc, and then the next they'll be following this orc, and it'll just create a disorganization, and you won't truly understand what's going on here. What's the attack plan? So yeah, that's funny and also very scary, I would say.
No-nonsense approach to warfare that stands the Goth orcs in good stead with their peers. The more an orc fights, the bigger he becomes. The bigger he becomes, the more orcs he can order about. The more orcs he shoves around, the more orcs will try and fight him for control of his mob. If he beats them, he'll become even more powerful and have even more lads to kick about. And so, his progression in the warband's hierarchy continues until he is big and powerful enough to challenge the ruling war boss. With their propensity for violence, it is little wonder that some of the most successful orc warlords hail from the Goff clan, their names recorded for all eternity in the records and annals of countless races. Yet there is one Goff orc whose legacy of bloodshed eclipses that of all others: Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka.
Are we going back to Kronan?
'Twas the night before Thinkmas. Not a creature was stirring, not even a squig. The choppers were hung by the banners with care, in hopes that the boss would not come to them there. The grots all shuddered awake in their beds, with visions of thinking dancing in their heads. The runt herds were all excited and hardly slept, knowing their charges all silently wept. Out in the camp there arose a clatter, all hid in their nests, knowing what was the matter. Around the camp they stomped with a clash, rank designated by their vibrant sash. The moon on the armour and newly fallen did show, a lustre of midday on the ORKS below, when out of the dark the knobs did appear, a colossal bunch who elicited fear. With a mega knob marching mean and quick, I knew in a moment he had a big stick. More angry than mad boys onward they came, and he hectored and hit them and called them by name. Now smasher, now crasher, now killer, now masher, on slasher, on basher, on grinner and blitzer. To the top of the grot pens, collect them all, let none dash away, dash away, dash away all. So round the grot pens the knobs all flew, each dishing out wallops and kickings too. Then in a twinkle 'twas heard on the roof, the prancing and giggling of each little youth. As I drew in my head and was turning around, out of the crowd the mega knob did bound. He was dressed in power armor from head to his foot, and all was tarnished with
the music,
blood and soot. The remains of a power claw he had on his back, none looked too close or he might attack. The hand of a Humie he had in his teeth, fumes of his anger encircled his head like a wreath. He was festooned with the heads of what seemed to be elf, and I peed myself a bit, in spite of myself. A wink in his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had everything to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to work. The knobs filled all their sacks with grots with a jerk, and laying his finger aside his nose and giving a spectacularly orky pose, he sprang to the catch wagons, to his knobs gave a whistle, and away they strode with a gargantuan bristle. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Thinkmas to all, and to all a good fight." Scarboys. It is a proven fact that the more orcs fight, the bigger they get. So years of constant warfare they become taller and heavier, their shoulders broader, and the muscles in their arms and legs swell to colossal size. These veteran greenskins can be found in all orc clans, but those of the Goth clan are the biggest and meanest of the lot, as they are invariably at the vanguard of every Goth orc charge. Known to the Goths as Scarboys, these battle-hardened boys are paragons of orcdom, their gnarled skin covered in countless scars and injuries from a lifetime of warfare. Though orcs heal quickly, sometimes even a Scarboy needs to take time out of his busy battlefield schedule to visit the doc. Normally such visits involve a can of fungus brew, a jab with a dirty syringe, and a whole load of metal staples to patch everything up. Scarboys see these staple-covered injuries as a sign of their status within the warband, and many still wear them proudly long after the injury has healed. Stormboys. Goth warbands often have a high proportion of Stormboys, most likely due to their militaristic approach to warfare. Goth boys do find all this parading, saluting and boot polishing a bit strange and un-orky. However, they can't deny that the Stormboys are eager when it comes to getting into close combat, even if their use of Volkite rocket packs can be inconveniently fatal. There are many famous Stormboys corps in the Goth clan, from Dagbag's Chop Squad and Kirk to Crunch's Killboys to the almost laughable Youth Brigade, a drill mob of young orcs who streak erratically across the sky, wearing their corps' practice rocket packs, just to see if they enjoy being airborne. The most infamous Stormboy corps, however, is Vulture Squad, who normally deploy from the bomber bay doors of a huge red fighter bomber right into the heart of enemies' ranks. Their merciless leader, Boss Zagstuck, has a fearsome reputation even amongst the Goths, as he'll happily execute his own lads if they show a hint of insubordination or cowardice. GOFF Blitzboys. All orcs value mobility. After all, it helps them get to the fight quicker. It's no surprise, then, that many GOFF warbands feature a Blitz Brigade, a motorized column of trucks and battle wagons, each vehicle carrying a bloodthirsty mob of orcs into battle. Blitz boys may not be as fast as the infamous speed freaks, but they pack more of a punch when they hit. GOFFs particularly favour battle wagons such as the Bonebreaker, which is built with spiked death rollers mounted on the front of its chassis. Another classic configuration is the Gut Ripper, which features several pairs of massive shears designed for snipping the legs, torsos or heads, depending on how high they are mounted, off their foes. Other GOFF creations include kill tanks like the Lung Burster and the Brain Crusher.
Okay, so the Blitz Boys of the GOFF clan do use vehicles. However, they're not like in majority in the clan, and they're also not really that fast compared to other clans, you know. So they do have vehicles, but it's not really what they're known for. What they're known for is for their, you know, upfront physical attacks, you know, using their weapons at very close range and overpowering their enemies with their with their, you know, brute strength, if I can say that. But they do have, you know, vehicles that they can use to transport their orcs all the way up to the front line, and the Blitz Boys are those people. And their vehicles are they have some nasty things, like really oh gosh. But anyways, let's continue. Yo.
Both of which are designed to provide mobile, if inaccurate, fire support to the rampaging GOFF advance. The GOFF Guard. Battle-scarred and grim, only the hardest of the hard have what it takes to join the GOFF Guard, the elite of War Gazgul. Some of the orcs in the GOFF Guard are nobs or war bosses that came from Gazgul's home world of ORKS, and they've stuck by their warlord through his many travels, sure in the knowledge that he will lead them towards the biggest and best fights around. Among the ranks of the GOFF Guard are the Ardshells, ORKS' own, the Head Bashers, and Ugrak's Uglies, but most infamous of all are Gazgul's Bully Boys, a huge mob of meganobs clad in the very best armour they can afford from Archimedes' workshop. On Armageddon, they were instrumental in the downfall of Hive Tempestora, leading the GOFF hordes into the lower reaches of the Hive's defences and butchering all those who stood in their path. They are rightly proud to be members of Gazgul's elite, and their back banners often display Gazgul's horned sigil. The Horned Bull. GOFF glyphs typically feature an orcoid bull's head with massive horns and tusks, typically stamped on black over bare metal or white over black armour. Quite why the GOFs choose such an animal as their clan symbol is a mystery, though Imperial scholars believe it's because they feel a kinship with bad-tempered, violent and flatulent beasts. The GOFs at war. The galaxy has played host to many GOFF-orc invasions over the millennia, from brutal attacks on individual planets to full-blown wars that stretch across entire sectors. Riser. In 925 M41, Forge World Riser found itself in the path of War Grax. The Skitarii legions of Riser mobilized to defend their home planet alongside Catachan jungle fighters and titans of the Legio Crucius, turning the planet's rust-orange surface into a colossal killing field. Yet this did not deter the Orc warlord, who sent down hordes of mech boys to fortify the Orc landing zones using Riser's vast piles of industrial waste. Before long, the Orcs were racing into battle in battle wagons built from the Forge World's own scrap piles.
I've said this before that, you know, Orcs are some of the best recyclers in the galaxy. They don't waste anything. They take any type of metallic waste, you know, electronic waste, and they can create marvelous machines that only they can use. That only they can use at, you know, with the best of their abilities, and they can defeat the enemy, you know. When the enemy considers, you know, derelict ships or vehicles or anything else as a waste and they just throw it away, the mech boys will see this as a gold mine that they need to mine. They need to produce weapons and vehicles and mechanized units for their forces. So yeah, definitely some of the best recyclers in the galaxy.
Grax and his Goff boys at the front of every assault. As more Astra Militarum regiments were drafted in from Dumalin, so too were the Ork forces bolstered by the arrival of Rargats. The Ork invasion of Ryza became a grueling war of attrition that lasted almost 40 years. The Orks eventually fell into disarray, and were finally wiped out following the death of Warlord Grax at the hands of Warlord Titan Anknus. When the Necrons of the Thocht dynasty awoke from their great slumber, they found many of their core worlds dominated by marauding Orks. Protocols were enacted to reawaken the dynasty's warriors, yet on the tomb world of Anknus, the Necrons got more than they bargained for. As the undying legions marched forth from their stasis crypts, they were confronted by a colossal horde of Orks led by Goff warlord Gazclaw. Without an overlord to guide them, the Necrons were chopped apart in short order. Their living metal bodies phased out of existence, only to be reanimated back within the tomb complex. Once more their protocols demanded they march forth, which they did, right into the waiting choppers of the jubilant Goff horde. It said that Gazclaw killed so many Necrons during his time on Anknus that his mega armor was made entirely of sheared-off chunks of living metal that shone like chrome beneath the world's unforgiving sun.
So because the Necroids did not have a leadership structure, that's why they were, pushed back all this time. I don't think so. I think the Orks, give it to them. The Orks are not just some pushover people. I mean, even if the Necrons are these advanced, super advanced, machines, that use advanced weapons, I'm still going to give it to the Orks. The Orks did well, They really did well. They pushed them back. They are enjoying the fights that they're having with the Necrons because the Necrons don't actually really die. They just phase out and then they're back in their tombs and then they come back outside again. And, the Orks are enjoying this. It's a party. It's a party. But ultimately, I'm going to give it to the Orks. They're winning this battle against the Necroids. Not just because the Necroids don't have a leadership structure. No. I don't think that would have changed much, really. Yeah.
Armageddon. The first Ork assault on Armageddon occurred 941 Millennium 41, when Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka's Space Hulk, World Killer, emerged from the warp and ploughed straight into the planet. Within hours, billions of Orks were running riot across the world, laying waste to all in their path. The Imperial defences were a shambles, the planetary overlord Hermann von Straub having deployed them piecemeal as the Orks advanced. It was the renowned Commissar, Yarek, who ordered the planet's astropaths to call for aid when Armageddon Prime fell, an act that saw him banished to Hades' Hive by von Straub. Yet while the Orks savaged Armageddon's Secundus, Yarek organized the defenses of Hades. He held them stoically against wave after wave of Ork assaults until Gazgul and his deadliest Goff warbands had to join the fight.
I remember Yarek in the Hell's Reach movie. I saw him there, fighting, and he lost one of his arms. And he put like one of these Ork mechanical arms on his, I think it was on his left, or was it his right arm? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I remember him.
Despite the colossal loss of human life, Yarek held Hades long enough for reinforcements to arrive, spearheaded by the Ultramarines, Blood Angels, and Salamanders. Gazgul's horde smashed the hive asunder in one final assault before retreating to the stars.
But then he comes back.
Following his defeat, Gazgul returned to his stronghold in the Golgotha sector. His invasions of Armageddon had caused catastrophic damage, but it had been little more than a test of the Imperium's defences. Over the following decades, the Ork warlord perfected his tactics and invested in new teleporter technology in preparation for the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen.
They also have teleportation technology? Okay. Wow. Orks.
On the day of the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, 57 years after Ghazghul's first invasion, Augur probes registered a massive disruption in the warp as several Orc fleets appeared on the outskirts of Armageddon sector. A dozen Space Hulks accompanied the Orc armada, clearly showing Ghazghul's intent to crush Armageddon. Outnumbered 6-1, the Imperial Navy had to disengage or face annihilation. Armageddon's astropath sent calls for aid. 24 Space Marine chapters answered the call, and Astro Militarum regiments from all across the segmentum were mobilized. When Ghazghul's warfleet finally entered the Armageddon system several months later, they set about attacking the planet's orbital defenses. The battle in the heavens raged for 3 days before Orc troop ships began raining down from the sky. Ghazghul's first act was to annihilate Hades' Hive, the city that had held out so long during his first invasion.
And this time he used an asteroid, overkill. He had to make sure that this city burns, he had to make sure.
Yet he did not commit any troops to the city, instead obliterating it with asteroids dropped from his orbital space hulks. Soon Orc forces led by Ghazghul's GOFF hordes assaulted the Hive cities, Vulcanus, Acheron, and Deathmire, all under attack simultaneously. Acheron fell to treachery from within. Vulcanus was besieged. Deathmire fared better, with the titans of Legio's Tempestor and Victorum holding back the Orcs. Yet many more continued to rain down from the skies, as Ghazghul's space hulks teleported heavier war assets such as Gargants and Stompers directly into battle. Even Yarrick could not fathom the Orc warlord's tactics. Ghazghul's masterstroke was the deployment of ROKS. These huge asteroids crashed directly into the planet, disgorging entire warbands of Orcs onto the planet's surface. While the Astra Militarum defended the Hive cities, the Adeptus Astartes attempted to destroy the ROKS, which had now been built into heavily armed and armoured Orc fortresses. It was then that Ghazghul launched his assaults on Hive's Tempestora and Hell's Reach, attacking both cities from the water using submersibles built in the Fire Wastes and Deadlands. Caught off guard, Tempestora fell within days, and the Hell's Reach docks were captured, though the city remained in Imperial hands thanks to the intervention of the Black Templars. Hive, in fairness, came under attack next by armies of Gargants, the titans of Legio Crucius were moving to stop them. The battle lasted 10 days, and finally saw the Hive besieged. In less than a month, Ghazghul had almost brought Armageddon to its knees. Though Ghazghul left the war on Armageddon soon after to pursue a greater destiny, the planet would suffer greatly at the hands of the Orcs, and much of its landmass is still dominated by them to this day. Battlefield Report. Observations on the psychic threat posed by the Greenskin race. Following a recent deployment to Savalox 22 alongside the Katshan 51st, I have come to the conclusion that we have greatly underestimated the psychic threat posed by the Greenskin race. As readers of this treatise will no doubt be aware, Weird Boys, subref Orc language and culture, are unsophisticated psykers, their powers manifesting in all manners of explosion and unpredictable ways. Hyperbole aside, witnessed manifestations include electroprojection, telekinetic mass relocation, psychospectral warp energy cohesion, pyromaniacal elemental manipulation, and physical empowerment. Further details can be found in the Scholastica Psychana records on Balor. I consider it my great misfortune to add a new psychic phenomenon to this list. A transcendental projection generated by a mass consciousness. During the extraction of Renfor Hive, I bore personal witness to the action of an Orc psyker who summoned into being a spectral entity that took on the appearance of a crude bull's head. No sooner had the manifestation appeared when the psyker hurled it towards our lines, coruscating green energy arcing from the projection's eyes. Though it passed harmlessly over us, and with such haste that I was unable to nullify it, the effect it had on the Orcs was profound. Within moments of the visage appearing, they sprinted after it, vaulted over the forward trenches and began the wholesale slaughter of the 3rd Regiment. Torn between my duty to the regiment and the reporting of this phenomena, I thought it best for the safety and security of the Imperium to bring such matters to light.
Okay, let me just understand this. So this weird boy projected this, this bull's head, and he directed it towards the Imperium of Man forces. It didn't affect them. However, the orcs, the boys that were there around this weird boy, they followed this projection, heading straight towards the Imperium of Man line, defensive line, and they just crashed right into them. So basically, this thing was just to taunt the orcs to proceed to push forward, to keep on attacking no matter what happens. I think that's what it was meant for. It wasn't necessarily meant to destroy the Imperium of Man forces. It was just meant to direct the orcs towards them. Hopefully that's how I'm correct when I'm trying to understand what Baldermort's guide is trying to say on this matter. But yeah, that's interesting.
It is to be noted that the orcs present on Savelox 22 were members of the GOFF clan, whose emblem has been well documented as that of a horned bull's head. It is my postulation that their masked greenskins generated enough warp energy for the weird boy to summon into being a vague manifestation of their collective consciousness, in this case, a bull's head. It is my concern that the orc race has become far more psychically attuned since the opening of the Great Rift, and it is my recommendation that further investigation and documentation of occurrences such as these is required.
Kronan.
The bosses were all called, their boys all arrayed as if for battle. Whilst the entire camp exploded into activity and nervous excitement, few could see the genius, the hidden power to be released. For this was not an exercise in teaching or raising cunning, as Kronan had said. No. It was a celebration of his thinking, his cunning. Past tense. Because Kronan now knew how to beat the Humies. Oh yes, he did. He had to clean house before the bigger scraps. He had to unify the War once and for all. And his idea, it was cunning. So cunning, you could put a tail on it and call it a gyrinx. And so, all unarmed, well, mostly, and prepared for the celebration, the mighty war of orcs, a veritable sea of seething, sweaty and flatulent green skins, all sat as one, mob unto mob, tribe unto tribe. But all of the leaders, the various bosses, all sat up front with the big boss, Kronan the Cunning. Sat on a velvet blanket of Tyrerian purple, the bosses sat silently adorned by their individually folded and personalized thinking grots. Only Kronan bore a hat, you see. There could be such a thing as too much cunning. And if any cunning were to be generated, then surely his hat would absorb and redirect it to the best receptacle. The cunning one himself, of course. Each thinking grot bore the mark of its corresponding boss on its cheeks, all four, the center of its forehead, on both feet and both hands. It seemed the branding runt herds had been jobs worth, or just enjoyed the writhing and squealing of the grots under the white-hot irons. Difficult to tell which, mused Kronan, but a certain amount of zeal was probably attributable to this being the first Thinkmas. And the bosses wanted to be dressed to impress, after all. As the still pungent whiff of scalded grot buttocks bellowed on the air, fighting for proboscis attention with the natural urinary odour exuded by the terrified grots. Every one of said grots gritted their teeth and remained silent, lest they be sent to the ranks of the soon-to-be burning, flying, thinking grots, those presently being loaded into a long rank of catapults. 'Twas a small mercy for some of the grots that they were given a red stick to bite down on to assuage the discomfort.
I can imagine now when they start screaming, No!
This was, of course, only for some of the biggest bosses and their knobs. some distinction had to be made for their luminous rank. However, it was felt that the nobs and Kronan himself did not require this distinction. Massive gongs were struck to signify the beginning of Thinkmas. All fell silent and closed their eyes as they sat as one. The gentle serenade of 100 catapults ejecting the massed, burning, flying, thinking grots into the air, so all might gain from the ambience, as their parting chorus spake into the winds of the valley and echoed to all and sundry.
No, 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 no.
And it began. Thinkmas. Alas, it was an arduous, interminable period of unendurable tedium that many felt stretched into hundreds of seconds, until the inevitable started to happen. And heads, well, strangely, the heads of the nobs of bosses Rotbagger, Redwheel, and Nostril Splitter all exploded, their grot headgear and their own craniums all explosively bursting under the pressure of their attempts to think. And as the crowd gasped and giggled, then guffawed, it was decided by all that this was now a very funny and very enjoyable festival indeed. But none now wished to try thinking anymore. It was proven to be very hazardous to one's health, and should definitely be left in the hands of those more, well, adept at the craft. Let Kronan do all that stuff, they thought. Kronan looked to his palms and saw the second detonator. He had destroyed the nobs of his rivals, his annoyances, but the actual consideration to use it on the bosses themselves was anathema to him. Kronan stood and turned, lowering the device over his shoulder as he looked at the three bosses and bellowed. His nobs rushed into the remains of their nobs, who might have eaten or discarded their thinking grots, as Kronan himself charged boss Rotbagger. Although told to present unarmed, this meant that they only had a few weapons each. Kronan took one Herculean leap into the air and came thundering down on Rotbagger with all of his fury, and with all of his huge axe. The much smaller orc attempted to block the blow, but the force of the strike ended only when Rotbagger was cleft mostly in twain, peeling apart from the tops of his shoulders to the bottom of his hip. Kronan rounded on Redwheel, and the two met with savagery. Boss Redwheel was fast, pushing forward with his power claw striking in an overhead windmill set of attacks, cunning, and bawling its hatred at him. Kronan rolled underneath the third huge swing and behind Redwheel.
Yeah, Kronan is cleaning house out here. It's like Game of Thrones, but even more unpredictable and just deadly. Like really,
As he span around to bring his power claw back into the fray, Kronan cut down hard and severed the boss's arm at the elbow. The claw landed with a thud at his feet. Redwheel cried out in anger and pain, but his mouth soon opened all the wider when Kronan's axe came round and cut the top of his head off, just above the tongue. The orc fell backwards and ended with its tongue caressing the grasses out of the now highest point of its body. Kronan put it out of its misery with his boot. Thrice. Wiping his boots on the grass, Kronan looked for Boss Nose Splitter, but he was gone. Disappeared into the mobs and sea of boys. The other bosses stood waiting to see if this was to be a full sweep, but were a bit relieved and also a bit disappointed when Daka von Smashhoven indicated for all to now sit down again. There was
like really, you're just not sure whether you're gonna get out of these missions, these meetings alive. You know, you would never be sure. Really, when the war boss calls all of you guys to congregate and let's have a thinking session, your life could be taken like at any moment. But the orc that retreated, that's a bit of cunning there. You've retreated, you live to fight another day, probably, hopefully. But yeah, Kronan, he's cleaning house.
was now glorious fighting across the entire war. But this was to be expected at a festival after all. And in the fighting, it was an almost universal coincidence that those younger and more enthusiastic followers of Kronan and his cunning came out on top. A new war was born on Thinkmas Day night. Tomorrow, they would be back on the move. Tomorrow, there may be less of them than before, but those that remained would be stronger, more brutal, and perhaps just a smidge more cunning than they were the day before Thinkmas. Now, with that fun out of the way, Kronan began to plan his battle against the Humies, for it was to be on the plains, where Humies were mustering and maneuvering so blatantly as to be doing nothing other than giving a direct challenge. And Kronan would accept it. A galaxy at war. Since the opening of the Great Rift, known to the Orks as Gork's Grin, the Orks have continued their crusade of endless violence across the stars. None have been so inspired to violence as the Goffs, whose mighty warlords have stomped, smashed and crumped their way across the stars in search of the biggest and best fights. Everywhere at once. Conflicting reports by Imperial strategos concerning the location of Gazgul cause consternation at the highest levels of the Munitorum. The Grand Warlord is documented to be within the Empire of Octarius, leading vast greenskin armies against Tyrannid and Imperial forces in that region, and yet he is simultaneously sighted at the sacking of Cantissa, upon the killing fields of ORKS in the Imperium Nihilis, and joining fighting around the Forge World of Ryza. Punitive executions decimate the command staff charged with tracking Gazgul's movements, even after it is observed that the Greenskins of the Great War are using warp storms to navigate the galaxy. Extreme empiric time dilation may be to blame for the confusion.
At first I was thinking maybe he cloned himself, but I don't think so. So yeah, definitely they've found out a better way to traverse the warp and get to their destinations far faster than the information gathering of the Imperium of Man. Yeah.
Triumph returned. After 7 years of brutal warfare, and thanks partly to the arrival of several companies of the Riftstalkers chapter, the forces of the Imperium finally defeat their Chaos foes in the Bargeist stars. A grand triumph is held, and martial celebrations spreading across a dozen loyalist worlds. Yet at the celebration's height, Warboss Gruck Face Ripper appears at the head of a brand new war. His greenskin flood the planets of Tremendix and Aposia, plunging the beleaguered Bargeist stars back into bloody war before the horrified Imperial defenders can rally their forces. The sacking of Krongar. The hive world of Krongar is invaded by Orks, and the local defense forces are quickly overrun. The entire Skarscale subsector is soon under Greenskin control, and becomes a magnet for Ork warbands in the region that inexplicably flock towards it. Imperial scholars believe that Krongar may become a staging post for a war, and put plans in motion to prevent the mass Ork migration before it can begin. Failed negotiations. A warband of Death Skulls led by Warboss Nolgrim attempt to recruit the mad Doc Grotznek to their cause with the promise of willing patience. The Grotznek is a Death Skull at heart. His loyalties lie solidly with Gazgul. He invites Golgrim into his surgery to discuss the Warboss's offer, while sending one of his Grot orderlies to find his Goff minders. As the two Orks debate the finer points of cranial rebuilds and bionic legs, Gazgul's bully boys arrive and set to work on Golgrim's warband with their kill saws. When the Warboss storms out of Grotznik's surgery to see what all the noise is about, he is confronted by a pile of dead Death Skulls and 15 gore-covered Goff meganobs. Before he can beat a hasty retreat from a tricky situation, Golgrim is jabbed with a profusion of filthy needles and dragged into the Doc's surgery, never to be seen again. At least, not in one piece. Voices from the warp. With the Great Rift tearing apart the galaxy and warp energy spilling into reality, a number of weird boys fighting on Armageddon begin to hear voices in their heads. Some believe it is Gork, possibly Mork, telling them to fight harder and give the Humies a good smashing. Others claim that they can hear the voice of Gazgul himself, and that the Prophet of the War is communicating with them directly. Weird Boy Nark of the Smasher Boys is so traumatized by the warp energy invading his brain that he stumbles from his copper tower outside Tempestor Hive, bellows a challenge at the Astra Militarum forces stationed in the nearby city ruins, then runs straight into their waiting guns. Incredibly, he survives the gauntlet of fire and unleashes a beam of searing green energy on a regiment of Steel Legion troopers. Seeing their Weird Boy getting stuck in, Nark's Goff boys run after him and join the fight. Unable to contend with such wanton destruction, the Steel Legion regiments fall back and bombard the city with 18 batteries of basilisks. Nark hasn't been seen since. Great expectations. Having heard of the battles raging in the Loki system, Goff warlord Zorg the Unstoppable decides he wants a piece of the action. Despite not knowing where the Loki sector is, he orders his mechs to pilot his ramshackle fleet into the warp and hopes for the best.
And knowing how they, their energy, is projected in the warp and how they're able to create things, and believe that it will work, and it does work. So something similar is also going to happen here where, they don't know where the destination is, but if they believe that they're heading towards that destination, they will get there.
In a rare display of navigational competence, his War returns to real space barely 5 days' travel from the Crimson Fist chapter planet of Rin's world, and immediately collides with a battle group of warships from Fleet Primus. Delighted with the prospect of a fight, Zorg aims his kill cruisers into the heart of the Imperial fleet and launches every available boarding craft he has at them. The Imperial forces, caught completely unawares, find themselves engaged in a series of desperate boarding actions that take several weeks to repel, greatly delaying the departure of the fleet. Revenge for Saibhal. Eric Morkai's great company reaches the mountainous jungle world of Saibhal, homeworld of the Obsidian Jaguars chapter. They find the planet's orbit strewn with the wreckage of Adeptus Astartes warships, and the planet teeming with Goff orcs. Determined to recover the gene seed of the Obsidian Jaguars and deny the orcs the chapter's technology, the warlord sends in a force to distract the orcs, then infiltrates the chapter's fortress monastery himself at the head of wolf scouts, infiltrators, and incursors.
They don't really need your technology, though. I mean, they can create anything out of scrap. So, you can destroy the technology, sure, but, they'll just make something better with it. So, yeah, for the gene seed, I understand, risking your lives to collect this very important material. Yes, I understand that. But then, destroying the technology, I don't think you need to do that. Just leave that part. Just focus on collecting the gene seed and get out as soon as possible.
He finds the Goff orc mechs trying to harness the power of the fortress's generators and orders the monastery's immediate destruction. The gene seed of the Obsidian Jaguars proves unsalvageable. A vendetta to be settled. Having heard of Gruk Face Ripper's return, Patriarch Tybalt of House Terrin sends a banner of Imperial Knights to join the war in the Bargeist Stars. Before they depart their homeworld of Volturis, however, Tybalt sends an envoy to Alaric Prime to seek assistance against this terrible orc threat. The starships return through the warp 3 months later, a single new occupant stored in the hold. Reconsecration. Following the desecration of St. Resmund's Hope by boss Zarstruck, the Order of the Ebon Chalice attempts to retake the Shrine World from the Storm Boss. The Adeptus Sororitas make planetfall to the north of Zarstruck's boss fort, on what was once a holy mountain, now painstakingly carved by captive Imperial sculptors into a series of titanic likenesses of Zarstruck's face. Enraged by the towering visages of the Orc boss, the Sisters of Battle begin blasting them apart with missiles from their exorcists. The destruction soon draws the attention of the Stormboy Corps, who hurriedly finish their parade drill, strap on their rocket packs and blast themselves across the ruined city to engage their new foes. The conflict grinds on for almost 2 weeks, with the sisters making slow but steady progress towards the boss fort, their attendant priests recovering what religious artifacts they can from the city's ruined sepulchres, mausoleums, and basilicums. It's only when they begin attacking the boss fort that Zagstruck feels his youths have had enough practice, and he joins the fight himself. Leading his Stormbolt elite high into the sky, he descends upon the Order of the Ebon Chalice like a meteor. With careful adjustment of his thrusters, he plummets earthward and crashes Karen Serida beneath his bionic feet. Within the hour, the Sisters of Battle retreat to their dropships. By the next morning, slaves are chiseling Zagstruck's face back into the mountains. Galactic teleportation. Archimedes trials his long-range teleporter for the first time, transporting a mob of Gazgul's finest GOFF knobs from the bridge of Kilrekka halfway across the galaxy to Krongar, where, after recovering their senses, they soon start bashing heads together to assert their authority.
That's amazing, the fact that they have technology that allows them to teleport from one point of the galaxy on the opposite side of the galaxy like that. You know, they don't need to traverse using vessels or using the warp. They just have this teleportation technology to do that. I'm just wondering, are they the only ones who have this ability, or do the Imperium of Man also have the same ability to you know, have a teleportation device that teleports you from one planet all the way to another planet across the galaxy? I'm just wondering about that. I mean, that's amazing. That is truly amazing. Huh.
The power required for such a long-range teleport jump cripples the generators aboard the Kilrekka, but Gazgul is pleased nonetheless. He quickly sets Archimedes the task of teleporting new units to Armageddon, just to keep the Hubies on their toes. Weird War. Situated close to the Great Rift, the Orc domain of Grok Ironfist spawns a far greater number of Weird Boys than ever recorded. In an unexpected turn of events, Grok is overthrown by a conclave of Orc Psychers led by the GOFF warphead Defgob, who has Grok crushed beneath a physical manifestation of Gork's, or possibly Mork's, foot. The build-up of violent psychic energy draws the attention of the nearby craftward Ulthway, whose Farseers follow the threads of fate to determine the threat to their people. Unable to derail or impede Defgob's rise to power and subsequent Weird War, the Seer Council of Ulthway manipulate the fates of others into doing it for them. Within the month, the 45th and 67th Infantry Regiments of the Mordant Acid Dogs are unexpectedly rerouted to a new war zone. The War of Fists. Asposia is liberated by two Imperial battle groups from Indomitus Fleet Quarters, who are joined en route by the Knights from House Terran. The Knights soon trace Grok's whereabouts to the forefront of the Bloody War, the civilized world of Gnosis 3. After making planetfall, the Knights quickly become engaged in a close-ranged war amid the cramped streets of the planet's capital city. The Astra Militarum forces that joined them are equally unprepared for such brutal hand-to-hand fighting. Unable to utilize their long-range guns, the Knights retreat to their landing crafts and re-equip themselves with Reaper chain fists on Thunderstrike gauntlets before striding back into the Orc hordes, smashing apart entire city blocks in their hunt for Grok.
And hopefully also the Astra Militarum, you know, put bayonets on their las guns and, you know, went out to battle with them like that. Hopefully they did something like that. But yeah, the Knights should have known. They should have been prepared for something like this. You guys can't just go back to your ships, then get your chainsaws. And I mean, this is funny. This is so funny. Really, it's so funny. You guys really should be prepared. If you're fighting against Orcs, make sure you have everything at hand. You have your guns and you have your chainsaw and your power blades and whatever else for melee battle. Because you know these guys love it up close and personal. They love it. So what are you doing? Huh?
The Orc war boss, however, has no intention of hiding and charges out to meet them. With brutal swipes of his power claw, Grok disables, then topples the Knight Fury Unbound before tearing the noble Freean heirs from his cockpit. Incensed, the remaining Knights unleash their secret weapon on Grok's nemesis, the Freeblade Garantius. Despite his battle lust, Gruck pauses to consider his options before charging into the fight once more. Inhumation Adjuration. In the wake of the slaughter of St. Resmund's Hope, the abbess of the Adeptus Sororitas makes a personal request to the Officio Assassinorum for the death of Boss Zagstruck. Her request for inhumation is granted, and the Vindicar assassin Novak Vard is deployed to St. Resmund's Hope to dispatch the Orc boss.
Like, this Orc boss, right, is so important that, and so deadly that they have to send out an Officio Assassinorum to do the job. Oh, okay, that's respect right there. They have such respect for this enemy. Ah, wow.
After 3 months without contact from Vard, the Vindicar Temple deployed 24 servo scouts to the planet to search for him. After much searching, their long-range scopes pick up his bio-signature inside the boss fort. The Officio Assassinorum do not know if Varda has been captured or whether he is still operational, but they are reluctant to send in further agents until his status has been ascertained. A prophecy fulfilled. Ghazghul Thraka makes Krongar his seat of power, and orcs flock to his banner from across the galaxy, drawn in by the prospect of a good fight. The Skarsgård subsector is flooded with war energies, as the number of orcs increases dramatically, and it is all that the Imperial fleet can do to prevent a war erupting into the galaxy. Among those battling the orcs is Ragnar Blackmane, Wolf Lord of the Space Wolves chapter. Drawn to the war zone by a Fenrisian prophecy, he alone senses the terrible threat that lurks on Krongar. Despite the huge number of orc ships plaguing the system, Ragnar orders his frigate, Thor's Spear, to run the gauntlet and enter Krongar's gravity well. Accompanied by his Wolf Guard, the young king makes planetfall in the capital city and begins his hunt for Ghazghul. When the two refinely...
You could have just, made an exterminatus on the planet, Or maybe because there's other ships in space, and they would destroy your frigate, I don't know. But, you could have just bombed the entire planet from space instead of landing there, personally going to attack these orcs. I mean, this is a trap. This is a trap.
It is amidst the ruins of an ancient cathedral, and both seem to know that it is their destiny to be there. Their bodyguards race into battle, but are swiftly dispatched, their corpses scattered about the holy building. Ragnar and Ghazghul clash, Frostblade against Powerclaw, neither fighter willing to let the other live. In the end, both are mortally wounded, the Space Wolf's body hewn apart, his colossal foe entirely beheaded. The young king reborn. Ragnar Blackmane's mangled body is discovered in the cathedral on Krongar, not far from Ghazghul's decapitated corpse. Much to the surprise of Ragnar's warriors, the Wolf Lord still stubbornly clings to life, and is returned to the relative safety of the Space Wolves fleet, knowing that he will die unless drastic action is taken. The
This is amazing. Wow. Okay, congratulations.
Wolf priests decide that he must cross the Rubicon Primaris, and they operate on him immediately. When Ragnar recovers, he is told of Ghazghul's demise, yet he immediately turns his ship back to Krongar, for he fears that his task is not yet complete. The War Resurgent. Ghazghul's head is discovered in the ruins of the cathedral, his one remaining eye still alive with bestial fury. Knowing that only one orc can fix that kind of hurt, Ghazghul's most loyal nobs drag his remains to Mad Doc Grotznik. The Death Scar's pain boy is overjoyed at the prospect of operating on the profit of the war, and commands his grot orderlies to open his cryo vaults and power up their contents. While Grotznik's labours gather pace, his work is interrupted by possibly the smartest contender for Ghazghul's throne, Def Colonel Zogboss. Determined to ensure his own supremacy by destroying Ghazghul's corpse, Zogboss storms Grotznik's laboratory at the head of his commando kill brigade. Hundreds of his orcs are fried by random flashes of energy. More are eviscerated by Grotznik's own corpse looters, who wield excessively large surgical tools. But Zogboss himself reaches the laboratory's summit and proceeds to smash up the dock's equipment and many of his towering constructs. Then he corners Grotznik himself looming over the mad dock to deliver the killing blow. Before Zogboss can kill Grotznik, a massive mechanized orc emerges, and a claw the size of a GOFF knob encloses on Zogboss's head and turns bone, flesh and iron to pulp. Within the hour, Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka is stalking the streets of Krongar once more, looking for a fight. End quote.
Guess who's back? Back again.
I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this look at the GOFF's clan of the Orcs. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, hit the notifications bell button, as I would not want you to miss out. So, no matter what you do today, do always try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.
Okay guys, that's it with the GOFF clan of Orcs by Baldermort's Guide to Warhammer on the playlist Kronan do Kronan. Yes, the clan is very, very personal. Can I say it like that? They are very personal compared to other clans that exist. I think these guys are more personal in terms of them, fighting against an enemy. They're very personal, very up close. They like using physicality, melee weapons. I think these would be the perfect challenges for any Imperium of Man forces, especially if they're Astartes, because the Astartes also champion this melee battle kind of culture. They love it, So definitely, the GOFF clan, they also like their melee contact. They have their weird boys, they have the storm boys, the scar boys, the blitz boys, they have the glove boys, and all of them have their own unique responsibilities, but their main bread and butter, I should say, is fighting up close against any enemy. And yeah, the elite boys, the glove guard, those are interesting. The glove guard are made out of warlords coming from the planet, their home planet, and very important, probably knobs as well, joining in this guard that protects their warlord, or their war boss, I should say. And yeah, that was quite interesting to hear about, that even other war bosses have to now be in this new organization that's meant to protect the main war boss. Yeah, so that was quite interesting. And of course also Kronan having his thinking meeting, his thinking session with all the other war bosses and some of them being killed outright just like that, because they haven't really been doing a good job in managing their boys. They haven't been doing a good job managing their mobs. And Kronan has to clean house. He has to make sure that these guys, whoever's going to be his lieutenants in his army, have to also have the cunning mentality. They have to work as one with their war boss. They can't be doing their own things. They can't be distracted like the current war bosses were. And he had to clean house. So yeah, that was quite funny, very funny in a kind of weird way. And yeah, like I said before, it's like Game of Thrones, but just even more dangerous, more bloody, more unpredictable, because really these guys thought they were coming here for a meditation, a thinking session, and then all of a sudden Kronan just decides, what, I'm gonna kill them all right now. I have to end this all right now. So yeah, that was a bit funny. But yeah guys, that's it with Baldermort's Guide to Warhammer. Remember, if you like the video or you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And if you want to check out the original video as well as Baldermort's guide to Warhammer YouTube channel, the links are in the description below. Okay, until next week, Thursday. Bye-bye.